Hi guy, welcome back TV spoilers. Young in the Restless Spoilers, Chelsea had tried to convince herself that if she stayed quiet a little longer, if she stood still for just one more step, everything would cool down, the way it always had before. But this time the unease wasn't a passing chill. It latched onto her chest like a weight, tightening with every breath. Ever since Adam let the details of Victor's leveraged plan slip, Chelsea hadn't slept through the night. The fragments kept replaying in her mind like the ticking of a clock in a dark room, insisting this wasn't merely one of Victor's familiar intimidation tactics, but a strategy that could turn a woman's safety and her children into currency. In Victor's world, leverage was never abstract. It came with real risk, real consequences, and real scars left on other people's lives. Chelsea understood that better than anyone because she had witnessed it, been swept into it, and once lied to herself that she could manage it. And because she had stood too close to the edge before, she was even more terrified that Lily would be pushed over without ever seeing it coming. Chelsea's guilt didn't come from actively executing the plan. It came from the sickening sense of complicity that silence created. Adam spoke as if he were unloading a burden, as if saying it out loud might lighten his conscience. But for Chelsea, every detail only sharpened the dread. She could see the architecture of the leverage clearly. Victor was targeting Lily, not through business or reputation, but through the rawest pressure point of all her instincts as a mother. Her love and her fear of losing her children. A staged kidnapping, if crafted well enough, would panic the victim at the exact moment, break her balance at the exact place, and corner her into the choice Victor wanted. What made Chelsea's hands tremble wasn't only the cruelty of the idea, but how easily the fate could become real in a heartbeat. Any plan that mimics violence carries the same fatal flaw: one miscalculation, one link in the chain taking things too far, or one person trying to prove loyalty to Victor by escalating the orders, and the whole thing slips out of control. Then Lily and her children would pay first, while Victor could keep his distance, coolly labeling it necessary fallout. Chelsea kept asking herself whether this was the moment she should step back, protect her own life. But every time she pictured Lily, something like responsibility slammed into her ribs. Lily wasn't someone who would crumble from vague threats. She was strong, rational, and battle-tested. That was exactly why Victor needed leverage toxic enough, personal enough, to knock Lily off center at the decisive second. Chelsea also knew another truth. Lily was deliberately keeping her distance from Kane now, holding herself in a safety zone away from anything that might destabilize her. And that was both her strength and her vulnerability. A strength because she was alert. A vulnerability because when someone retreats, they often believe they've reduced the danger when in reality, they've only changed its shape into something quieter, harder to predict. Chelsea's decision to act didn't arrive as a sudden impulse. It arrived as a bitter admission that she could not endure the feeling of watching from the sidelines. She understood Victor and she understood Adam. If she exposed her intent to warn Lily, if she left the wrong choice, Victor would tighten his grip instantly. Adam, even if he didn't want to harm Lily in a direct way, still lived too close to Victor's orbit. And that proximity made Chelsea's movements easier to read, easier to twist into an accusation. So Chelsea's first step wasn't calling Lily outright, it was finding a safe channel. A path private enough that Victor and Adam couldn't follow it back to her. The secrecy made Chelsea tense and miserable, because it forced her into the life she hated most, the life of hiding, calculating, and fearing discovery. She had promised herself she would never return to that kind of existence. Yet for Lillian, for innocent children who could be dragged into a filthy game, Chelsea accepted the risk of stepping back onto the minefield. With every careful move, Chelsea felt the war inside her intensify. One part of her wanted to believe Victor would stop at threats, that he wouldn't allow real harm, that it was all psychological warfare. But the other part sharpened by experience and bruised by truth, refused to let her cling to that illusion. Victor didn't need to strike with his own hands to create damage. He only needed to build conditions, apply pressure, and arrange choices so that someone else walked into the trap on their own. And once the trap snapped shut, Victor could claim he never forced any on. Everything was simply a result. Chelsea feared that cold, moral escape hatch. It turned victims into people who blamed themselves, transformed destruction into a lesson wrapped in hypocrisy, and made women like Lily question their own judgment. Chelsea didn't want Lily falling into that spiral. Didn't want Lily looking back later and wondering why she hadn't seen it sooner. When Chelsea finally reached Lily through the discreet channel she'd built with such caution, The first sensation wasn't relief, it was shaking fear. Making contact was only opening the door. The next step was speaking the most terrifying truth in a way Lily could actually accept. Chelsea knew Lily well enough to understand Lily wouldn't swallow vague warnings, especially where Victor was concerned. Lily had faced Victor before, stood firm, protected herself. If Chelsea said too little, Lily would dismiss it as paranoia. If Chelsea said too much, Lily might feel attacked, manipulated through fear, and react by resisting the warning itself. Chelsea had to keep the rhythm exactly right, specific enough for Lily to see the danger, honest enough for Lily to feel this wasn't another puppet show, and steady enough not to let panic infect the message. Lily responded exactly as Chelsea expected, skepticism first, then a heavy silence of someone assembling pieces. Lily's doubt didn't wound Chelsea, it made her ache for Lily even more. A woman like Lily wouldn't surrender to fear because of a single warning. She needed logic, motives, patterns, needed to see Victor's playbook in the shape of what Chelsea described. And in that moment Chelsea felt as if she were balanced on a thin wire between two cliffs. On one side, the risk Lily wouldn't believe enough to act; on the other, the risk Lily would believe too quickly and react wrongly, exposing herself to Victor. Chelsea couldn't demand Lily's trust. She could only place the truth in Lily's hands like a cold stone, uncomfortable, sharp, impossible to pretend wasn't there. Chelsea emphasized that Victor's leverage didn't end with persuasion or bribery. It was a system of soft coercion where tempting offers were only a shell covering a prepared trap. She pointed to the most immediate, most dangerous possibility: a staged kidnapping. An event engineered to ignite panic, to melt principles under pressure, to force Lily to choose the path Victor wanted. Chelsea didn't present it as a prophecy. She framed it as a realistic risk, a familiar escalation pattern, an ethical line Victor was more than willing to cross. Most importantly, she said what she feared most: that fake could become real with Victor. The real outcome might not be the goal, but it was always an acceptable collateral cost if it secured submission faster. Chelsea didn't say that to terrify Lily into chaos. She said it so Lily would understand this wasn't a psychological prank. It was a threat that could reach flesh, breath, and blood, especially where children were concerned. The seriousness settled visibly into Lily's focus, into the way her thinking sharpened. Chelsea felt the moment Lily shifted from skepticism to true vigilance, and not the impulsive kind, but the disciplined vigilance of someone rereading her surroundings with different eyes. Lily began reviewing recent interactions, invitations, small signals that once might have seemed harmless. Lily didn't need Chelsea to command her. Lily needed to know the board had been set, and she was the piece Victor intended to move. Once Lily understood that, Chelsea felt one burden easy and another weight fall heavier. Because from this point forward Lily would have to choose, and every choice carried its own cost. Chelsea stayed within the boundaries she'd promised herself she wouldn't cross. She didn't fabricate new details, didn't turn the warning into her own counterattack scheme, didn't try to steer Lily into a plan Chelsea hadn't earned the right to design. She only stressed the nature of the man they were dealing with, someone who would use any tactic, including staging a kidnapping, to win. Chelsea also understood something complicated: if Lily chose to cooperate, Lily might do it in a way that was safer for herself. Sometimes surface-level cooperation was the only way to buy time, to blunt the immediate danger. Chelsea didn't want Lily to punish herself for choosing flexibility over pride. What Chelsea wanted was simple: if Lily had to negotiate with Victor at all, she had to do it with clear-eyed awareness that she was bargaining with someone who treated morality as disposable. Lily's safety and her children had to come first, not the illusion of winning a pure fight. When the contact ended, Chelsea sat still for a long time, as if she had set down a heavy stone only to find her palm empty and freezing. She didn't know whether she had saved Lily from something or pushed her into a more sophisticated war. But at least Lily was no longer walking blind. And in that moment Chelsea also understood she could no longer pretend she was outside the game. She had stepped onto the board, whether she wanted to or not. The hook didn't arrive as a crash or a scream, but as something smaller, nastier, like a single strand of hair caught in the throat. When Chelsea checked the device and the hidden channel she had used, she noticed an irregularity. A tiny shift from its original state, as if someone had tested the door she believed she had locked. At the same time, Lily's new vigilance came with a cold, crawling intuition. This warning might not only be a lifeline, it might also be the signal that someone had dared to break Victor's rules. And if Victor had caught even the scent of that, his next move would no longer be fake leverage at all. It would be a real squeeze, sharp and undeniable, meant to prove that no one escapes his hands. Lily had once believed the safest way to survive the undercurrents of Genoa City was to retreat at the right moment, to keep her distance from battles she never asked to pay for. She tried to trust that if she stayed away from Knief she stepped out of the vortex. For a while everything would cool down on its own. But the farther she went, the more she realized a brutal truth followed her like a shadow. She could leave, but she couldn't escape. Because in Victor and Kane's war she had been positioned as leverage. Long before she ever saw it coming. That realization hit with a kind of betrayal that wasn't just about broken promises, but about the way people could treat her like a piece to be pulled back and forth for advantage. For Lily, that hurt even more than heartbreak. She could endure her own feelings being torn apart, but she could not accept her children becoming a bargaining line. Her maternal instinct surged like a cold flame the more she felt threatened. The clearer her mind became, the harder her spine set, the less she was willing to let anyone cross that boundary. Whatever she still felt for Kane was not something Lily could easily name, but it lived inside her like a scar that had never fully healed. It. And the sting was immediate. She wasn't blindly defending Kane, and she no longer believed love could magically fix everything. Yet precisely because the feelings were still there, she felt the bitterness more sharply when she realized she was being dragged into their collision. In the cruelest way. On one side was Kane, the man she had tried to distance herself from in order to protect her own heart from old mistakes. On the other side was Victor, the kind of man who didn't need love to strike, only benefit and control. Lily saw clearly now that Victor was making everything worse on purpose, as if he didn't just want to win, but wanted to prove that everything belonged to him, including other people's right to peace. And once Lily recognized she was being used as a pawn in that power struggle, she understood she had no choice but to stop running. Avoidance only made her a softer target. Silence only made people believe she would endure it again. Her decision to return to Genoa City didn't come as a sudden impulse. It came as a quiet oath Lily made to herself. If someone wanted to play a dangerous game by invading her personal life, she would walk straight into the place they assumed she would never dare enter. She didn't return because she enjoyed confrontation. She returned because she understood her silence was being interpreted as permission. She returned because if she was going to protect her children, she had to reclaim ownership of her own story. In the moment she prepared to go back, layers of emotion stacked inside her: rage at being manipulated, pain at realizing she had underestimated Victor's coldness, and a very real fear that the instant she stood in front of him, he wouldn't respond with words alone but with something sharper and more elaborate. Yet fear didn't stop Lily. It only made her more careful, more precise, more determined not to be steered by emotion. Lily's sudden appearance at Victor Newman's office happened almost without warning, like a hard knock against the invincibility Victor always carried. A man like Victor rarely looks truly caught off guard, but this time there was a brief break in his rhythm, a rare second where he lost the advantage because he hadn't expected Lily to choose direct confrontation over continued retreat. Lily didn't arrive as someone begging, and she didn't arrive as a victim drowning in panic. She arrived as someone who had finally seen the game and decided to flip the table. She accused Victor outright of manipulating her personal life, turning private choices into bargaining tools, and damaging her relationship with Kane in ways she could no longer dismiss. What frightened Lily wasn't only that Victor had interfered, but that he had done it with the confidence she would never stand up, that she would shrink back, adjust herself, reshape her life to fit his control. Lily had come to shatter that confidence. Chelsea was in the room, and her shock seemed to hang in the air. Chelsea had warned Lily, had tried to pull her out of the darkness, but she hadn't known what Lily would do with the warning. She certainly hadn't expected Lily to return to Genoa City and walk straight into Victor's center of power. As Lily leveled her accusations, Chelsea found herself suspended between relief and dread. Relief that Lily was no longer passive. Dread because she understood Lily was confronting a man who never loses publicly, without exacting a price. Chelsea watched Lily and realized this was no longer about quiet warnings through secret channels. This was a direct collision where every pause, every look, every measured breath could become a weapon. And deep in Chelsea's conscience, something twisted painfully, because if Lily was hurt again, Chelsea knew she would struggle to forgive herself for knowing the danger and still being unable to stop it. Lily demanded that Victor end these dangerous, calculated games immediately. She wasn't speaking only for herself. She was drawing the final line that a mother draws when the world becomes predatory. Someone might try to manipulate her, but no one was allowed to use her children as tools. That line made Lily formidable, because Victor was accustomed to people fearing him because of power. Lily wasn't there to prove she was stronger than Victor. She was there to declare that there were things Victor had no right to touch. And in Victor's world, where everything is negotiably an unnegotiable boundary is the hardest thing to crush, Victor, though surprised, regained his composure quickly, an instinct built from decades at the top. He narrowed his eyes, studying Lily not simply as an angry woman, but as a new variable that had stepped onto the board and could disrupt the structure he had built. In Victor's gaze there was challenge, but also a cold flicker of interest, as if he were measuring how far Lily would go and whether this was pure emotion or strategy. Victor isn't moved by morality or feeling, but he does notice that perhaps even respects in his own ruthless way the strength of someone who can stand in front of him without trembling. Lily saw that, and she understood this confrontation would not end with a few sharp words. It would open a new chapter in Genoa City, where Victor wouldn't just respond to protect his authority, but would move to restore control by making Lily pay for the act of daring to stand up at all. The air in the office thickened as if a storm were being compressed inside four walls. Lily felt her heart pounding, but she refused to let it show. She gave Victor no crack to pry open, because Lily knew that in battles like this, even a second of hesitation could be turned into a blade by a man like Victor. Chelsea stood there like an unwilling witness, feeling the pressure between two opposing forces, long-established power on one side, a mother's fierce resolve on the other. And in that moment Lily understood the most frightening part wasn't what Victor might do next, it was that she had stepped into the exact territory Victor preferred. The zone where he controls the rules, the tempo, even the shape of other people's fear. But Lily also understood something else, and it steadied her. If she didn't step in, Victor would still come for her. The only difference was that he would catch her at her weakest. At least now she stood here with her back straight and her eyes open. And as someone watching this story unfold, I can't deny the feeling rising in the half thrill, half dread. Because Genoa City has taught us again and again, the moment a woman stands up is rarely the ending. It's the bell that announces the most refined retaliation is about to begin. Victor doesn't need to raise his voice to prove he's dangerous. He only has to smile and let everyone realize what trap they've stepped into. Part of me wants to believe Lily will seize control of her life again. But another part fears that this courage will make Victor target her even harder, in the cruelest possible way, aimed precisely at the softest place. And when Victor narrowed his eyes at Lily as if calculating a new move, I couldn't shake the sense that today's confrontation was only the opening shot. While the next chapter will be Victor proving he isn't playing just to win, but to make anyone who defies him regret they ever stood up. On our TV Spoilers channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting perspectives. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.